Hello and welcome. I'm Les Bubka and listen to Accidental Podcast or something like that. My today's guest is Robert Davies from Redfish Karate and one of the famous bastards, Bunkai Bastards, that is. A permanent resident of a dark place of karate. And I hope today to explore the dark place where scrutiny, asking questions, and questioning everything is the right thing to do. How are you, Robert?
I'm very well, thank you, Les. Within the scheme of things, obviously, I have ongoing health issues, which have been a bit of a drawback for the last couple of years in my journey. But by and large, I think I'm doing better than most people at the moment.
I'm going to start with something completely different,
Mhm.
which bothers me, and not many people can explain it to me properly. Why in English language, Robert shortens to Rob, Bob, and many other versions of it? I can't see the connections between some of the shortcuts we're making.
Okay, I am going to be absolutely zero help to you as far as that is concerned. It's just the way it's been in my life ever since I can remember. But it's interesting because the Robert thing, only my mother used to call me that when I was in trouble. I tend to be Bob under my working name, on my teaching name, and I'm Rob for home and family, for no good reason. Hang on, strange things are going on. Bear with me a second. The staff have bought me a cup of tea. Thank you. So, yeah, good timing. So, yeah, the Bob thing, I don't know, but I use it to my advantage because I can be three different people.
Cool. That's one of the things you have to accept, I think, and just go with it. So keep pestering other people about it, but I hope.
Yeah, it's someday somebody may come up with an answer for. I could make something up for you. I'm good at that. I do that all the time.
That's okay. I was just thinking that maybe you can. And
no.
Your background in your work was or still is as an engineer.
Yeah.
So you got that very precise mind, I would say. My wife is engineer. My father-in-law is engineer, and it's that my little one's gonna be engineer as well. I am nearly an engineer, would like to say, or at the current times, everybody who is technician is called the engineer, the gas engineer and stuff like that. Driving proper engineer is mad, but I am a car technician, so in the brackets of being engineer. How that thinking is applied to your karate and martial art in general, or life in general? Is that what you're driven by, or that comes in, comes out?
No, I think actually it's a difficult one to say because people go into engineering, but I think you are either an engineer or you're not. And that comes, I've always been the same, even as a small child, is having to know why. And I think that is just something that is in your psyche. You can't just accept things. You always have to understand why and burrow down and find the reasons. And if there aren't reasons, then you have to keep niggling at things until such time as you find them. And that seems fairly common to certainly all the good engineers I've ever met. They're all that way inclined. They're all people who, even if nobody was paying me to do this for a living, I would still be doing that because that's just the way my head has to work. I can't not know.
The why thing is actually driving me mad. I might join all the people, martial artists who I know who are bald, because my son is asking it about 2,000 times a day. Why, which is a good and bad at sometimes. I'm happy that he wants to explore stuff, but just relentless. But that's the joys of it.
You can understand how people who work with me feel.
Do you think that that questioning all the time puts you in the as you described it, in the dark place of karate? And I'm apparently on slippery slope. And can you explain and delve into that dark place?
Okay. You see, I don't consider it as being particularly dark or even shady, to be honest. It's just for me, it's the logical progression of where to go. And I've been sliding down that slope into the dark place, if you like, for a very long time. Probably even before I started considering myself a practical martial artist. All the way through my serious karate training, even in the coloured belts, I was already looking at the whys and what's going on behind this, and how does this work, and what does this mean? Because, as I say, that's just the way my brain works. But once you start doing that, it starts leading you to a set of conclusions that don't really sit with the continued practice of the 3K style karate. And I still enjoy that. I perfectly happily did that for many, many years. And if it wasn't for circumstances beyond my control, I probably still would be. But I was put in a position where I had to make a choice of one or the other, and I had to follow where my heart was going, rather than just sticking to doing the same stuff. And it was probably a good thing, because I think if I'd carried on doing what I was doing, I probably wouldn't be in karate anymore. Because I'd got to the stage where, well, what I'm doing this year is what I did last year and what I did the year before, and I get bored very quickly.
I think that's one of the key things that puts people away from karate, especially from 3K. My wife, when we met, she's a second dan in completely different style. I would consider them borderline 3K, but not practical, if that makes sense. And their syllabus after the first dan, it's you're just gonna teach. We're doing this old stuff, and it's just gonna teach. You're gonna teach more, and that's gonna learn. Well, to extent it's true, because when you're learning, when you're teaching, you're learning more.
Yeah.
But they've got a massive dropout of people. So either we're speaking with them because we're friends, and they say that we're just staying because it's a social activity now. We're not learning anything new, or just go. It's in a way, from my point of view, it's like they're treating it like a driving license, something to achieve. And that's done. You can cross it off from it. It's done, and move on, do something else.
And I've seen that a lot. And again, when I was in the traditional side, you'd see it happen all the time. Once I've been there for a while, you'd see people come up, they'd come up, they'd take their shodan, and then they might turn up the next week. And if they did, they might stay 3 months, 6 months, and then disappear. They've ticked that box, they've got their black belt, and they're off to do something else now. I was slightly odd, and I don't know where it was. I don't know if it came from my training that I'd done before I had the long break, but I had set myself a target when I first started back in Shotokan, but my target wasn't black belt. My target was third dan. Because for me, I don't know that I had the understanding of where we were going, but for me, I saw Shodan as being a step. And once you got to third dan, then you were starting to know something about what you were doing and understand what's going on behind what you were doing. And that was a goal. But what happened with that was that the closer I got to it, the less it mattered to me. And that's a thing in my training at the moment. Really, I have no interest in the grading system. I have to run a grading system in my class because it's expected, and there are actually many positives to that for students coming up, and for me as an instructor to see my students go through that coming up. But on a personal level, it's not a motivator for me at all anymore. So I've got certificates up on the wall. They're the last ones I'll ever get. I'm out of the system now, and I can't see any motivation for going back to it.
Yeah, sorry. I do emphasize with your saying about the black belt is becoming later just a kind of side effect of training. I did try as well to have a group without the belts, but I finding that modern society, or maybe just the Western society, is have to have that short-term goals and reward. It's like a carrot and a stick, isn't it? That you go in with, I've got this belt, I've done well, I'm gonna push it to next one. There's only few people I met who I have to actually force to get another belt. One of my students is just like, I don't want it, so I have to force him to wear the new belts because he just wants the white one. He doesn't care. But majority, especially the younger people, need that graduation, gratification. That's the word that I was looking for. Gratification. Yeah. I achieved something. I'm doing well. I'm on the right track.
It's interesting the way it works, and again, I don't know if maybe it is age related. I don't teach children anymore. I did it for a number of years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think there's a lot of benefit to it for young people, but it's a different thing. And I'd got to the stage where I wanted to do what I wanted to do for me and follow my path, rather than keep teaching the same old syllabus stuff for their benefit. So I did that for a number of years, happy to do it, was happy to walk away from it and do my thing from then on. And it's interesting, I don't know if it's because of my age, but the age range of the people who come to me are typically 40 plus. I have the guy I'm thinking of particularly, who's been going through my grading system, came to me on his run up to his 50th birthday. And he'd set himself a target, I think, as having reached the half century, that he wanted to be a black belt by such and such a time in karate. He'd done other martial arts many, many years ago, but he sort of set himself that as a target. And coming to me as an adult and going through the grading system, even him in his 50s, having set himself that as a specific goal for one of the things he was going to do by a certain point from his age, he's got, before COVID came in, he got about halfway through the Q system. He's about 5th Q. He may have been going for 4th Q next grading. But again, that has just come down to his attitude is, yeah, I don't really care about the grade. I'm here for the training, not the grading. So that, I don't know if that's my influence being a bad thing rubbing off on him, or if he just decided that what we were doing was more interesting than the goal of getting through the system.
I think it's a mix, because I don't teach children either, and I spoke recently with Jamie Gray. He doesn't teach children either. I think that mentality is coming from, you learn from your teacher. Either you copy your teacher knowingly or unknowingly, in a physical manner and psychological, I believe. But then you're adding that layer of yourself, because I'm tired of teaching same stuff beginners. So I can see that, and I'm happy that we've got a really small club. So even if people coming, let's say, fresh, they're kind of jumping on the level where everybody else is, and they're catching up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see that, it's gradually, the more you show to them that it's not important, the less important for them it is.
Yes. Yeah. No, I can see that. But going back to what I was saying earlier, because my teaching, much like everything else I tend to do, which is going to sound strange coming from an engineering background, but I'm relatively unstructured in what I do. I have a syllabus, I have written it down, and I have a step progression through the gradings, but my lesson plans are not necessarily geared that way. I will go in with a rough plan on, we're going to do this tonight, this is what I think is important, this is what we were working on, or this is what we need to work on. And then you'll find that we'll drift halfway through the class, because somebody will ask a question and we'll get into but what if this happens, and what if, well, I don't know, let's explore that and see what happens. So it's very easy to get into a loop of, well, okay, the syllabus for your next grading is this, but tonight we're doing that instead because that's more interesting than doing this. And what I find, from my point of view as an instructor, it's good to come back to the gradings occasionally, because I can then see the holes in what I'm teaching, not what the student is learning, but things that for a level they really ought to know and have down and grounded, I have been lax in getting them to the standard for that part, because I've been more interested in doing something else. But again, it's fortunate, as you say, I've got a very small group. We can play catch up on those things when we need to. And because you're dealing with adults, and everything we do is functionally sound, the body mechanics and the biodynamics are all sound. Just polishing the edges of those things is not much of an issue. But I do tend to worry that if I don't go back and do that, we will lose some of those fundamentals, and you do need to have that grounding.
So I'm exactly like you. So I go with a plan, but the plan always goes away because people ask questions and we're drifting and doing and things, which I really like. I like when people asking questions and we can, like you said, explore. And and I'm using the syllabus as, like you said, for me, not necessarily for my students. It's like a roadmap for students, what they can expect. But it is for me to, like you said, see what we're doing and where we're going.
Yeah.
And I use the kata. So my syllabus is focused all about the kata. So all the basics within the kata.
Yeah.
And kata as that anchor to keep me within the frame of work, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't go, because sometimes for me it's very difficult to unmix the sporting side of wrestling and background when I've been teaching for a long time in Poland. I'm enjoying that avenue as well. So sometimes I'm going drifting and we're going so far into the wrestling side of stuff that it kind of loses the side of the karate, if you see what I mean. Or kind of like to explore both things, but you know.
Yeah, I think one of the difficult things is demarking what is karate. I've had a bit of jiu-jitsu in my background. Students coming through have done similar. So I've done a bit of Brazilian style jiu-jitsu, Gracie jiu-jitsu, and I also did traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu a few decades back now. So there's a lot of that informs the way I see things. But also, as I've got older, I'm only a few weeks off 63 now, I can't do a lot of the karate style things that I did when I was 20. So my training tends to drift. So what I see as karate is very much my karate, and my karate is whatever I do. But it's called karate because I'm a karate instructor. And I don't have a problem with that. You know, if we end up grappling, or we end up rolling on the floor, or we end up locking or twisting and turning people, as far as I'm concerned, it's still karate. It's just what I do. And if I can step back and say, oh, now we've done that. Now, if you step back and look at the shapes we've done there, you can see kata in that, or you can see that in kata, and I can make a connection. And if I can make any sort of connection there, then it's valid karate as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. In case of wrestling, it's kind of a few things doesn't work like that, because if I go to the sporting side and suddenly we do and I pin you on the back for 3 seconds and then I jump up and in there, I can't already as a karate for you, self-defense or whatever, you want to pinning somebody for 3 seconds.
That's not an issue for somebody like me, because if you get me on my back on the floor, it's going to take me about 5 minutes to get back up again. I'm not quick off the ground, so once I'm down there, we're staying.
Because that's what I was talking with Jamie Gray as well. Because you are a tall person, the groundwork is not your natural place, isn't it?
No. I find it very hard, and I certainly found that when I did the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu stuff. I have mixed feelings about it as practical self-defense, but there are some really good skills to be had there, and the guy I was with was a really good teacher. But it's not built for people my size. You know, getting into those positions, particularly if you're grappling with somebody who's a foot shorter than you, you've got no chance of getting into those spaces.
Yeah.
So it's not for people like me. And to be honest, if it wasn't for the rule set and it wasn't for me learning to use the skills, I don't see me ending up in those positions very often because I wouldn't let the person get that close in the first place. Sometimes you can't avoid it. So you need to spend time on the ground. You need to have a basic understanding of some of these skills. But it's not what I would prefer to do. So I need to know enough to try and get me out of trouble if it comes to it. But it's never going to be a go-to for me because it's not my environment.
Yeah, I enjoy rolling, and I done BJJ as well for a year or two. Not in any significant way that I can put anywhere saying that I've done BJJ.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree that you cannot fight with something you don't know. If you at least know what's gonna happen or what to expect,
Mm-hmm.
counter that and be better prepared than just being dragged and say, "Oh shit, I don't know what's going on and I don't know what I'm gonna do."
Yeah.
So I recommend everybody having a being torn and thrown and being pulled and dragged into the floor and see how it goes.
Yeah, agreed. It's definitely something worth having a go at. And like I say, locally, I know a really good guy for doing that. What I don't have is any issue with saying to somebody, well, if you're interested in that, go and see him. Because if they then come back and say, yeah, actually, I enjoy doing that more than I enjoy doing this. Well, great. You're supposed to be doing what you want to do, not what I want you to do. So I don't have any problems with that sort of thing, with recommending people I know who have skills that I basically just don't. I don't make a pretense about what I do. I have a very limited skill set, okay, because as I've gone through my karate career, what I've done is shave off things that aren't applicable to me. So when people are coming to me to learn my karate, they genuinely are doing that. I have enough of a grounding in all the skills through 20 odd years of classical karate to teach them all the stuff you'd see on a 3K syllabus, but I don't do a lot of that myself. So if you're coming to me to learn the full 3K gamut, I'm not the guy. But I know people who are, so that's fine.
I think that comes with the lack of insecurity. I see that everybody who I ever met, most 90%, I cannot generalize, are confident in what they do and happy with what they do. They don't have a problem with recommending anybody else, because you want people to be happy and do what they want instead of keeping them tied to your dojo and not letting them anywhere else. I find that strange in karate sometimes.
It's strange, but it doesn't seem to be very uncommon. Particularly on the 3K side, that was entirely the background I came through. Although my chief instructor, to be fair to him, at the time I was coming through, he knew I was looking outside. He even recommended some people to me so I could go and explore those things. And that muddled along fine for a long time. But I think because I wasn't making a secret about what I was doing, there was some concern that other people might think it was all right as well. And I think also it got to the stage where the classical karate wasn't attracting the same numbers as it was when I started. So I think anything that encouraged people to look outside or think differently and not follow the party line became discouraged as time went on. So I don't know if that was just, if that's an ego thing or just down to the trying grimly to hang on to what you've got, because there are so many options now that there weren't when I started.
Yeah, definitely.
It's changed a lot in the last 10 years. It changed quite significantly in the last 20 years. When I first started in the late 70s, you really had to search to find somewhere to go and learn any martial art. So karate was basically the option that I drifted into, despite that not being, because being a child of the 70s, Enter the Dragon was my introduction to the martial arts. But the closest thing I could get was Shotokan karate, which was a 45-minute to an hour bus drive away. from where I lived, but that was what I could get. And when you're that age, it's all punching and kicking and putting your legs up in the air. It all looks the same. So that was good enough at the time.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate with my teacher because he always encouraged to go to different system styles, teachers, and try stuff. And kind of all of us done it. But yeah, he was saying as well that when he started teaching, or when he joined in late 70s, that there was so many people in the dojo that the instructor could throw people away because there was queue waiting for people. So you know that why you're not tough enough. Get out of my dojo. There's 10 people waiting to come in for your spot.
Yeah. Well, when my first dojo, I had a very short foray in 1973, and I think I lasted about 6 weeks at the time. I'd only just turned 15. I'd just seen Enter the Dragon. I was keen to go somewhere, but it was just a local dojo had set up around the corner, and the beginners went in, and you were given to a brown belt to teach the beginners. And the guy who was teaching was just basically a very loud, shouty bully of a guy with no teaching ability, but just wanted to shout at you and tell you what an idiot you were. And even at the age of 15, I wasn't the sort of person who thought, yeah, this is for me, I'll put up with that. I thought, no, forget that, that's not for me. But when I started training seriously under Paul Perry, when I first started back in 78, yeah, there were probably half a dozen people instructing in the room, and every belt group going up had about 20 people in. So there'd be 20 people in the beginners section. Then the next belt up, there'd be another 20 people with another instructor. And we'd have the whole length of the leisure centre. And there were probably 150 people training any Friday night. You know, and now if you go into a dojo that's got more than 10 to 15 people, it's a very healthy dojo.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned the teaching side of things. How do you find in karate compared to other stuff? Maybe involving teaching from the wrestling side. I think karate is lacking one common way of teaching. Nobody teaching really how to teach. It's the individual search in it. Either you done some education with it, or you practice, or you research it. But one guide how to teach, one methodology for karate. It's all kind of patchwork for me.
Yeah, and I think this is where the 3Ks tends to find it easier. Very few people I've seen are taught how to teach. But if your style of karate is just monkey see, monkey do, as long as you can make the shapes and shout the numbers 1 to 10 in a poor Japanese accent, then you're a karate instructor. And this again is one of the things that I had and still have a bit of an issue with, is people teaching who aren't teaching. So as I say, you can put a gi on, it can hide a multiple of sins, and if you don't teach the body mechanics correctly and understand the body mechanics correctly, you can do a lot of damage to your students. It might take a long time, it might take 10, 20 years to show, but you can hurt people by poor teaching methodology and not understanding the mechanics behind what you're doing. And even now, I know it's not that I'm particularly magic, but one of the things that bugs me is I get guests come through my dojo reasonably often. What I build myself on in the past is the bit on the side, you know, so you can do your normal training, that's fine, but if you're interested in the sort of thing I do, but don't want to transition, you don't want to give up what you're doing, then come to me, that's fine. There's no onus to get into the system or anything. And we can just do that. You can come and join in. It's interesting. We'll have a bit of fun. You might learn some things. But I get people come through my door who are brown belt, first dan, second dan, above, and they cannot do the basics correctly. They don't know how to move. They don't know how to stand. Their joint alignment there are just fundamental things wrong. But that is the state of a lot of karate as I see it these days. And I think it's particularly on the back. And like I say, I taught kids for a long time. I'm not anti it at all. I think it's a very worthwhile activity for children. But I think because karate has become seen as this children's activity, as long as you can sort of look right, make the shapes and go through the steps on the syllabus, that's good enough. I don't think people are looking at adult biomechanics deeply enough to understand it.
Yeah, so about this methodology and stuff, I really wish that we had better one in karate. And I'm just started to gather resources from my coaching in wrestling and stuff, and I'm gonna have an attempt to write a book about the methodology of my teaching in karate. So
well, it's definitely, I wouldn't say it's an issue in my club, because my club works really well, and I think the way I teach for the subject matter that I teach seems to work well also. There doesn't seem to be a problem with that. But what I couldn't do is take the way I teach and expand that and say, okay, now we've got 40 people here, I can teach you that way, because I have to be too hands-on. You know, it doesn't expand. It's not a scalable thing.
Sure. I think that in karate, from the other side, we are very fortunate that there is a lot of people who are natural teachers. So because, you know, karate, I'm just going to put the extra light. Karate is not something that is well paid if you teach it. Some people have to accept that rule, but in general, it's not something. So you need to really want to do. And I'm finding that the people drawn to teaching are kind of natural teachers. So not trained teachers, but got that ability through genes, through, I don't know, just like being an engineer. You're either born teacher or not.
Yeah.
That's kind of my belief, and that's what I'm seeing for myself. I'm not a trained teacher. My all teaching education was after I started teaching and realized that I don't know what I don't know, if that makes sense.
No, I understand that. But again, this is, I think, why the onus is on me to really understand what I'm teaching. So if I don't understand the whys and wherefores and everything right to a real deep level on what I'm teaching, then I can't just step back and make the shapes and show you stuff. I have to understand it's the way I learn. And then if I have the understanding, I can teach you, because no matter what question you ask, we can burrow down into those answers. So that's the way I tend to approach it. It's interesting to hear you say not many people make a lot of money out of karate. I laugh because invariably, unless it's a very good week, it costs me money every time I teach. Yeah. And that has done for 13, 14 years now. So yeah, I'm not in it to make my fortune. It's stretching the imagination.
I'm trying to be in it to make my fortune and my empire, as I say, but this is the first year, funny enough, with the COVID, that I'm actually not losing money on karate, but it's only because I done t-shirts and stuff like that, plus the books and stuff, so I'm balancing at nearly zero, but I'm not losing money, so I consider myself as a success in a karate world.
Yeah, well, it's like the stuff Brian, Andy and I do together. Again, we're never going to retire on the proceeds of that. But what we do get to do occasionally is go out for a curry on somebody else's money.
Yeah.
And from our point of view, that makes us very happy.
That's great. Earlier you said that you adjusted your karate with your age. I'm just past 40, so my body is starting turning against me. It's starting to be my.
You have a lot to look forward to.
Yes, it's kind of starting, but I think a lot of people, including myself, got a struggle with admitting that we're not accepting the changes and that we need to change the methodology of training for ourselves. Because I still got that 20-year-old brain there who tells me that, yes, you can do this. and then 2 days later it's like, why did I do that? So what's the key to training efficiently and not getting injured? I'm asking you because you're a bit more experienced than I am. You've got your illnesses and stuff. How to work around the things and don't make worse for ourselves.
I'm going to say I'm probably going to let you down here, because I was having this conversation earlier with my wife today, actually, is that looking out from behind my eyes, I'm still 20.
Yeah.
If you look in the mirror, I don't know who that old guy is. He's not the guy who's in my head. So there are things that I can't do. So there are things I specifically don't try to do. High kicking is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't believe that I couldn't do a Jodan Mawashigeri, but I haven't tried for some time. I know I can't do a high side kick, thrust kick, because, again, this comes back down to understanding biomechanics, because the damage I did to my hips under instruction of my instructors, trying to do something that physically isn't possible with the way the human body works.
Yeah.
So I'm fairly sensitive about things like that. But what I've found is that a lot of the stuff that would be damaging, I just don't need to do anymore. And again, like I say, because I've naturally evolved my karate to suit what my skills and what my strengths are, I never really have to put myself in a situation of doing myself harm.
Mm-hmm. So there's no way to acknowledge that you're not 20-year-old in the brain if you've
I'm sure some people can, but my concern is, and I saw it with my father, my concern is that if you start thinking like an old person, it becomes self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
You become that old person. So, like I say, in my head, I say I'm still that 20-year-old looking out. The reality is I'm probably 12. And if you look at the things I do, the things I say, and the things I enjoy doing, I'm very much regressing. I'm not that mature adult that I was briefly at the age of about 19 to 21. It was a phase I went through and grew out of again.
I've seen you taking very risky decisions with the comments, especially in cleaning the ovens and stuff like that. Very very risky.
Stella and I have been together a very long time. We had our 40th wedding anniversary this year. We've been together 43 years. We were both very young. But this is going to sound awfully smug again. But what I did as a conscious thing, even as a teenager, is not pretend to be somebody I wasn't. So that when we were together and when we got together, this is what you were getting. So she's very familiar with me and what I say and what I mean and the way we interact together. And she gives as good as she gets. To be honest, if you want to know who's in charge in the relationship, don't look at me on the camera, because you're not seeing the boss here.
Yeah, I totally know that. I've got the same here. And funny enough, more I'm talking to you, and more I see my older reflection, if that makes sense, because
that must be very disappointing for you.
Because I had the same with my wife when we got married. I say, you see what you're getting.
Yeah.
You read that book, that's what you get, and I can get the jokes like that as well. And it's all fine. So I see what you mean.
Yeah.
But it's a good entertainment for other people.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah. And going into your comments, you don't hold back on the criticizing side of a martial arts, and I would attribute that to being engineer as well. The conversation with my wife, she explained to me how. And my father-in-law, how her brain works. It's gonna be confirmation from you or not, but the engineer always looking for the faults and the most depressing outcome. Is that true? And that's driving you to the.
I'm not sure depressing is the word. although it may well be, listening to me, other people get quite depressed. I can understand that. But yes, what you're looking for is failure and how to avoid failure.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so because that's the thing you can't afford. I tend to be, and again, this is from my working side. I wouldn't say my karate side so much because I'm fundamentally quite a lazy person. But from my working side, I've also never been of the opinion that good enough is acceptable. Good enough may work, but it's not good enough. It can be better, and if it can be better, then it should be better. But you've got to balance that with what I see as a lot of stuff, and I see particularly in the martial arts, is people try to overcomplicate their solutions. And for me, the best solution has to work, but it's got to be as efficient as it can be and as little effort as it can be. And that may again be down to the fact that I'm in my 60s now. But if I can find a working solution that requires not too much movement, not too much effort, and is sound and reliable and works, why would I look for a more complicated solution to that same problem?
I love overcomplicating things. I love it. It's the more complicated moves, the more interesting.
Well, there's a lot more fun to it. And the thing is, you go to seminars, you see these things all the time. People want and you've got to look at it two different ways as to why you're doing the martial art. I do the problem solving and the basic problems of self-defense for somebody like me who lives in a relatively safe area and is also 6'3" and 16 stone and has a certain look about them. Self-defense isn't a daily issue for me. So I have a set of go-to things that I know work with people my size and above. And if I apply them to smaller people, then smaller people are going to get damaged by them. But there's a limited amount of fun to be had in that because there's not a lot of things to do. So you make problems and you start to look for more and more esoteric problems. And this is where kata really comes in as a way of keeping me sane for problem solving, is that there's a running joke again between Brian and Andy and anybody else who knows me that basically everything I need to know and everything I need to demonstrate is in techie. That's not because techie is magic. It's just because everything I do and everything I know, I can relate it back to that and say, well, if you do this, it's like that. But I also do it with the first couple of Heian katas. And having done that, really to teach what I teach from a practical point of view, if we do Teki Shodan, Heian Shodan, Heian Nidan, that's probably 99% of everything we need to know. And I could just hang all my karate on that and never do anything else. But the exploration of kata and finding meaning to kata and looking at all the things and the subtleties that go with that become an academic interest for me then. So they need to be practical and workable solutions, but they are variable solutions to problems I've already fixed, if that makes sense. Yeah. So they're there to provide a depth of interest. And also, just because my answers exist in those couple of kata and the stuff I do, if people are coming to me to learn, it doesn't mean that their answers are my answers. So for instance, like I say, my approach and the stuff I do, no disrespect intended here, it almost certainly wouldn't work for you, because a lot of what I do relies very much on the fact that I'm a big lump that I know how to deliver really efficiently. So you get a lot of weight hitting you in a very short space, very quickly. And for most situations, that's all you need. But if I was 5'6" and 8 stone, the things I do to protect me would not work for you, if that makes sense. So there's a lot more to explore, and what I've been doing more and more so in recent years, I think, is probably exploring other people's problems. And this is why it's good to teach, and this is why it's good to do seminars and get involved in all these things, because I'm having to ask questions that personally I don't need the answers to, which also means that I'm not just looking at scale. I have to understand the problems other people are facing, the way the world works if you're a different size, or a different size and a different gender. And I'm spending an awful lot of my time these days trying to get into the head of people who aren't this person. Yeah. And again, so that's a whole new thing for me, and it's a whole new field of study, and it's another thing that keeps me interested.
I think that's one of the issues in karate, that a lot of instructors are convinced that the things they're doing gonna be working for the other people. So I always, always done and saying, I can put that off because it's me. I move that way. I've got my own habits, the way I've been taught. But you don't have to. You have to find your own ways to find the solutions to the problems we're working on. I can give you guidance, but I don't necessarily give you a solution because you're not me, simply.
Yeah. Well, one of the big things straight away with that is that even with people who I teach, and some of the people I teach are my size, that's fine, that's fair enough. So we do the same things mechanically, and the physics of it should mean they work. But that is only part of the picture. What works for me is a combination of my mentality, my mindset, and my physicality. You can't separate the two. So a phrase I used in the past, but it's a phrase that seems to be the approach of a lot of traditional martial arts, is that technique isn't magic. Just because you know a technique, just because you can do a technique, is no guarantee that that technique will work for you. And I think this is where people fall over it when they actually try things in the real world, is that, well, I did this technique in dojo, I can do it properly, my instructor said this, my instructor said that, but it doesn't work for you because you know the technique, but that's only a small part of the picture.
I was just reading the book by John Tition, his new book. You know John, don't you?
Yeah.
And one of the things he said that you should go through the list. What are you able to do under stress? So a lot of people training and never do that list. And I went through that list, and I've been in a few alterations, but reading through it, I said, well, I couldn't intentionally try to kill the person, even if that. I believe at the moment I never been tested in the way that somebody tried to kill me. I would be able to kill the person in self-defense. I think I would fail through my own, belief system or morality. I cannot be sure because I never been in a situation like that. It's just what my brain tells me at the moment.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? And it's not something. Well, it is something that some people test, but it's not something as part of your training you can ever test. You can only work on theory. You can drill things, you can think about things, but until that day comes, you never will know.
Exactly.
And it will depend on that day, because a decision you make on that day might not be the same decision you make on another day. And this is where you hear a lot of, oh, well, I would do this. Would you? Would you really do that? It's easy to say these things. And again, a lot of the stuff I do it in my teaching, but my dojo isn't particularly different from anybody else's. We do martial arts training. We discuss self-defense, but I'm looking for practical stuff. But when I'm doing things like the Rory Miller courses, or we're going away and we're doing stuff that we're rolling around on the nightclub floor or hitting each other with bottles off the side or playing on the iron stairs, the things I do then, I go out of my way to make people feel uncomfortable. I do all sorts of weird things. And again, I don't know if this is normal behavior or if it's just come from my background and that the damage I carry over the years is that I am comfortable with doing things that most people get very, very squeamish about very quickly. And what I've always said is that learning self-defense is about becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. You do not have to take that step past your personal lines, but what you do need to understand is where your personal lines are drawn, because it's too late to find that out when the situation comes. If you've been thinking, well, I can rely on this, I can rely on that, and then you find I can't cross that line, then all the training that you've done for years before that counts for nothing. So you need to try and understand those things. You can only simulate most of it, and you can only talk about these things and get these pictures in your head, but you do need to take the time to sit and consider these things seriously, rather than just the glib, oh, I would just do so and so, which a lot of people, you spend as much time on the forums and the Facebook groups as I do. You see all the people sitting there all the time saying, oh, well, I wouldn't do that because that doesn't work. You just want to do so and so. Do you? Do you really? Do you think you could do that? And I have lots of pictures in my head of things that I'm fairly comfortable that I probably could do, but I don't know because I've never had to. And it's no use pretending otherwise. I am not a street fighter. Never pretended to be.
I had a kind of eye-opener for things what you can do and what you cannot do when I joined in the paramedic school. There were certain things that I was fearing that, we've been told so much that, you're going to see blood, you can pass out. The birth delivery, and it's so shocking for some people and stuff. And I thought that it's gonna be difficult, but I found it very easy. I never expect that reaction, but the one thing which always comes back to me, we've been assisting. Part of our training was assisting in operations. So in part of anesthesiology, so playing with the dosages, or just giving the tools, the easier stuff. And we had a guy, some operation on the stomach opening and stuff, and I thought, oh, that's gonna be awful. And I was surprised to myself that within 20 minutes of looking at somebody's guts being pulled out, I was thinking what I'm gonna have it for lunch, if I'm gonna have it with the ketchup or I'm gonna have it with mustard.
You're wondering whether you're having sausages today.
Yeah. It's and you analyze that and thinking, what on earth is that? A coping mechanism to brain just being taken away completely from a situation, or is the training we had that in the paramedic first thing which we've been told, you have to treat people as objects, because if you get emotionally attached, it's gonna ruin you. So it's kind of
I can see that. I can see that, because it's, again, it sounds awful to say it out loud, but when I'm actually training in those situations, my mindset is that I really don't care about other people. They're not other people. They're just something for me to play with. But I think when we're looking at fear of what might happen and what might not happen, and what I found with many things in the past, is actually the fear of something is worse than the thing itself actually turns out to be. The first time somebody punches you in the face and your nose explodes, I've had that happen to me. Now, to think about that, you think, oh no, I would hate that. But when it's actually happening, it's just something that happened. Oh well, never mind. But thinking about these things, breaking bones, dislocations, things that I've had in the past, if you talk to people about them, the fear of them will put them off. But what you find is that having been through them, it's so, yeah, whatever, it happens. It's like pain. Fear of pain is worse than pain. We're well adapted to coping with pain. It's just messages to the brain. But being afraid of being in pain is a good reaction. It helps us avoid a lot of things. I'm talking rubbish now, but
no, it's very interesting. It just brought my mind about the exploding nose. Last time I had the exploding nose, it was when I met Don Kane. We started. Nobody wanted to train with me on joint seminar with Ian and Don. So they kindly enough been swapping with me. So when Don was teaching, I was training with Ian. When Ian was teaching, I was training with Don. We decided with Don go a bit more with oomph, and having the size of my nose, you went into way of his fist, and then I spent 10 minutes sitting with the toilet paper nose.
Yeah.
Since then we're good friends.
they're fine margins when you're training, though. You know, this is the thing. And if your mindset is such that, oh well, I wouldn't want that to happen, and that's a lot of what's happened in karate anyway. I don't know if it's the blame culture or whatever, but people are so keen on not running any risks. But you find that, well, once these things happen, they just happened. Nobody died. It was fine.
Exactly.
You know,
I never thought to blame him on the spot. After, now I can use that all the time. Every time I see him, he's like, "Watch out, he's gonna break your nose."
Yeah, well, see, the way I look at all these things, anything that happens like that in training, is what you actually end up with afterwards is a good story.
Yeah.
And you know, if you haven't got those tales to tell, then you haven't been training properly.
Exactly. We drifted a bit, but it's good conversation. I was gonna ask you about how do you decipher the kata? How do you find the useful things? And I'm gonna use again John's teaching book, because I think there's a great thing about forms. You are more. I'm not in the self-defense. It's not my expertise. But you, John, Andy, and Brian are kind of in depth in that. Does kata contain movements which are not applicable? Because what John is saying, perception of things which work in the stress might be completely different what they actually done. So they think we done this and it worked, and actually it was completely different technique. Do kata are full of this stuff, or there's space for it? Are we trying to over-engineer things?
I know what John means with that, because particularly having been on one of his sim days and done some stuff and looked back at the videos afterwards, that it's interesting that what you think you've done in a stress situation, and then you look back at the video footage of what you actually did, was completely different. And the one that sticks out for me in the sim day that I did with John, we were doing some work with knives, and I was actually looking after, in the scenario, my son, who was a small teenager, who some Larry guy had come up and he'd pulled a knife on him. So what I was doing was protecting my son, got between him and the big guy who didn't even see the knife, and I was calling him all sorts of names under the sun, my kid, for pulling this knife. This was the way John had set the scenario up. But I actually did, in my head, what I thought was a really good disable. I got behind him, I'd pulled his head up, I'd locked his arm out and controlled the weapon. But okay, calm the situation down. This other guy can off. But when I look back at the video, what I'd missed entirely was the fact that the boy, before I got hold of him, had swapped the knife from one hand to another. Right. So I thought I'd done really well in that situation, and I was quite pleased with myself. But when you look back at it, what I'd done was, if it had been any in intent, totally ineffective. So this is one of the things we did at the last Suju session, when we do the nightclub sessions, myself, Brian and Andy. We had a gauntlet at the end where we have a number of scenarios and different things set up around various places in the nightclub. So we've got 2 floors and a dozen rooms and things to use, the toilets, the stairs, everything. So we set up various stations with people who were going to do different things. The people going didn't know what was coming. We would run them through some hard aerobic stuff for a couple of minutes before they went, so they were already gasping when they started. We put them all the way through this gauntlet things. That was fine. They came back up the stairs, back to the end area, and the very last thing we did while they were exhausted and gasping, but relieved to be over, was then get them to give a witness statement of what had happened, where they'd been, and what was going on. And it was really interesting to see. We had one guy there who spent a lot of time on the doors, obviously did this whole thing very frequently, And he was quite clear and concise, and he'd been paying attention. He knew exactly what was going on. But virtually nobody else really had any idea what had happened. All they knew is they'd been through it, but they didn't know what they'd done, how they'd reacted, what had happened to them. It was just stuff going on. And then there's a big thing that we backfill stories afterwards.
Yeah.
So we clarify things in our brain afterwards, and we fill in the gaps. Now, as far as I've been a long way going around the houses to get back to do kata contain moves for this, that, and the other. So I think, and it's again my personal opinion and my personal approach, I think that people overcomplicate kata to make it look more clever than it is. But that again may be down to my limitations. What I take from kata effectively are principles and movement. Am I dropping my weight? Am I raising my weight? Am I twisting? Am I turning? Am I doing this? And I'm not trying to do anything particularly clever in my approach to things. What I'm doing basically is clubbing people with my excessive weight or knocking them over because I'm large. So I don't do a lot of locks. I don't do you know, if something presents itself to you, then we train it, you take advantage of it. But as my go-to thing when I'm looking at kata application, I'm looking to make things as simple as possible, as gross movement as possible. And it's not always a popular thing. It's not, you know, popular sessions at seminars because it doesn't look like proper karate. I think one of the, very early on when I was doing this, I think the thing that summed it up is we were doing something from Hien Nidan. I was doing it in dojo with the old group that I used to be with. And the comment I got was, well, this isn't karate, it looks more like sumo. Because, yeah, it's all in close and we're just wrestling, because that's what happens. But people want it to look like karate. You know, and I think because of that, even though the applied side is picking up really well, a lot of the stuff I see tries too hard to still look like karate. But it's difficult to video principles of movement. You need to feel things, you need a partner, and you need to be there. So I understand the limitations of the media with stuff that people are trying to get out there, is that if you're looking at a video clip from a distance and you just see two guys shoulder to shoulder, head to head, moving around, seeing what's going on is virtually impossible. So you can't really learn that stuff except via hands-on.
I'm in a kind of a comfortable position because I don't teach the self-defense side of it, although I believe that my stuff works, the core stuff works, but I love overcomplicated stuff in kata.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I teach plenty of those things in dojo because what I run is a karate class with an emphasis on self-defense. I don't teach a self-defense class. You know, that's an outside thing. That's an occasional thing that we do.
I'm finding that a lot of people who I'm training with, they're saying that, oh, that's not karate, that's a combat. It's a combat system because you're throwing people, you sweeping the legs, you're doing this or that. And I'm thinking, well, what does it matter if it's called karate? I've got the gi. I'm a karate person.
Well, that's, to be honest, that's why I still dress up. Because if I didn't, nobody would know I was doing karate. And this is the thing, it comes down to the style and the look. I have dropped, I ummed and ahed many times, and I know, because I've had this conversation with John a number of times, and he keeps coming back and saying, well, if you're teaching the kata, then you're still doing Shotokan. But I've just, because my emphasis is different, although I am still teaching the kata, and I'm teaching the Shotokan versions of the kata as I learned them, because effectively all I'm doing is hanging my martial art on those frames. So if I learn a different version of the kata aren't teaching me stuff. All I'm doing is hanging what I know on those shapes. So I don't see that it really matters which kata I do. But I've walked away from the Shotokan label just because it causes so much consternation with real Shotokan people who tell you that you're not doing it right. So I'm just doing karate. It's my karate. I've got my name on it, and I do the Shotokan kata because I come from a Shotokan background, but I've just stopped claiming to teach it. And I hung on to it for a while again because I was under the idea that I would teach enough of it that it was portable. So if people came to me for a while and then went off somewhere else for their level and what they knew, they would fit into anybody else's Shotokan class. And again, in the last couple of years, I've sort of given up on that notion because people aren't coming to me and going somewhere else. So why do I teach them stuff to make it portable when they just want to learn what I'm doing? So we'll do that then.
Yeah, it is funny how people are attached to labels. As I hope John don't mind, I'm going to say that, but I conversate with him quite a lot online for the messaging, and he was saying that if he puts stuff in a gi, he's putting off his self-defense people. If he puts stuff without a gi, he's putting off people from karate to his content. So it is kind of like you. I and Ian as well. I dropped the stylistic approach. Hence my change to less Bubka karate jutsu instead of Shin karate, because that's my base. But I'm doing my own interpretation of the movements. And as you said, it's just fucking movements.
Yes, well, actually, it was Brian who said it originally. This was down at the bash, but it was too good a slogan not to hang on to, because effectively, that's martial arts in a nutshell. If you take all the labels away, it is just fucking movements. And it's then what you do with them. And as soon as you take those labels away, you find the movements that we do, the things we do in kata, or even the kion that we do. If you take the label off and take that picture out of your head as, oh, this means so-and-so, those movements are applicable to so many situations and they just work. So yeah, label disease is a real issue because it's just so limiting on your understanding of what you're doing, because you're trying to make what you do fit the label rather than just exploring what you do and what you can do with it.
And that kind of label gives people justification to criticize others. I'm finding, especially now when I got this TikTok challenge, and I'm putting a lot of short clips when I cannot really explain what I'm doing because I've got 15 seconds or 60 seconds. Put the glimpses of important things for me. And I've got a bunch of people going, no, that's wrong. You know, it's not karate. You're doing this for heel up, heel down. What does it matter? Enjoy the video. If you like it, take whatever you want. If you don't, just go away.
I've got to be careful here because, as I say, I've been fairly free with my opinions over the years, so somebody could no doubt step back and find something. But my feeling is that the moment somebody knows what's right or wrong, you can put them under the heading of not really knowing anything at all. If you know what's right and you know what's wrong, you don't really understand what you're doing.
You actually, because I don't know if you aware of that, but Andy Allen took your what you said, the quote. Can I say quote or the part of your
he edited something that I said out of it. I can't recall what it was at the moment.
It was that it's a lifelong learning because people teaching understanding.
Yeah. That karate takes a lifetime to understand because it's mostly taught by people who don't understand it.
And actually, Andy upset me with this one because he kidnapped my my haters. I meant to be commenting on mine, not on his. That he had like hundreds of messages saying how you don't know nothing about karate because you said that, and if you knew, you wouldn't say it.
Yeah, well, it is interesting, isn't it? Because again, this is where I say it comes down to target audiences, and where I think personally I probably don't have that much of an audience, because you've seen the sort of things I say and the comments I make, and I have been doing that for many years, and this is the first time I've ever said anything that's visibly upset people enough for them to respond to. And it pales into insignificance compared to some of the things I've said over the years.
I'm finding it very interesting how it for me personally, my mentality how changed. because when I started doing the YouTube videos and stuff, I was so worried about. It comes down to what you said. The fear of things is much greater than actually things happening to you.
Yeah.
So I was so afraid of people criticizing my stuff, and overthinking in the head. But when it actually started happening, I'm kind of looking forward to it because it gives me content. And another engineer which I'm watching, I posted that video about flashlights. He's an engineer for cars, and he embraced his haters. He says that every video, if he doesn't have a 25% of haters, he is disappointed. So I took that on, and I'm looking forward, and I kind of looking forward people to criticize my stuff because it gives me something to think about, and confirms that something my way, not copying somebody else.
There are a number of ways of looking at that. And of course, again, the thing about getting negative feedback is that, again, it comes to the knowing you're right or wrong thing. If somebody can say something, you can go away and think, rather than just assuming you were right all the time. Somebody can say something, if you can go back and say, okay, I thought about, no, I was right. But it's still knowing you're right, but it's knowing you're right because you've not just assumed it, you've taken it back, somebody's criticized it, you've looked at it and still decided you were right. Then for me, that is a different thing. We should all be open to criticism and questioning all the time. There are a lot of people who will just tell you that you're wrong because you don't do what they do, or just because that's what they do for a hobby.
Oh yeah, I had that actually. You just brought it to my mind again. Because I do Naihanchi quite quickly. I like to do it fluently. And I think Noah Legel posted as well, and Paul Maslov, I don't know if you were aware of him, done it quickly as well, as just taking Mickey out of me. And there was few guys telling there, oh, that's not how you're doing. You meant to do it slow and precise. So then myself, Paul, and Noah asked, well, can you explain why? Oh no, because that's if you knew, you knew.
Yeah, and that's the classic answer, isn't it? It's the whole, well, you obviously don't understand karate. Yeah. And that was one of the things that Andy Allen got on my quote, is that, well, you can't say that, you obviously don't understand. Well, no, I don't. Explain, enlighten me, tell me. If you know I don't understand, it must be that you know what it is I don't understand. So explain it to me from your understanding. And you will never get an answer to that.
No, that's funny. My although in relation to wrestling, but they've got their own issues. I think every branch of martial arts have similar issues. Yeah, it's our little hell, our little karate hell. Where there are people just enjoying what they're doing, learning from everybody else, and those who I call them protectors of the tradition. They must protect their ways and stuff without actually understanding them.
Well, again, if that's what floats their boat and that's what keeps them happy, then fine. And like I say, I did that for close on 20 years. I was doing that stuff all the time. I was doing my other stuff as well, but I was doing that. I was quite happy within that bubble, doing that side of it, and saw it as a self-contained thing. But it's not right or wrong. It was just a thing that I was doing. And people who do it that way aren't wrong because they're not doing what I'm doing. They're doing what they want to be doing. It's when they come out of that bubble to tell me why what I'm doing isn't right. But they can't tell me why. I'm perfectly happy if they come out of the bubble to tell me what I'm doing isn't right, and they've got a reason behind it and they can justify it, because we can have the conversation and I might learn something.
I think that brings us back to we talked about it when I hosted Bunkai Bastards. Martial arts, in a way, I think all the activities are, politicians as well. It's kind of, we all got our own church, and some people have the urge to bring that religion to the other person who clearly doesn't believe in their God. And that kind of going through the ages, you can see that that's the human pattern, that our ways are the best. We need to bring you a religion, our way, civilization, whatever. if not by a gift, we enforce it on you.
Well, yeah, I've been through phases of zealotry in the past myself. You know, when I first started down the applied path, you're learning new things, and suddenly it's a very exciting world of all these things that you didn't know existed that you're now discovering. And it's very easy to make the assumption that the reason other people aren't doing those is because they don't know, so you have to tell them. But after a period of time of going through that, you calm down a bit. You should realize that it's not that other people don't know, it's that they don't care. They're doing what they want to do. You do what you like, but they're not interested in your little world. That's just for you. And I reconciled myself to that a long time ago, but I wouldn't say that I've never been guilty of doing that, because that just wouldn't be true.
Well, I think we all, when we got a new thing, the new best thing for us, we try to gospel to other people. It's just how persistent you are with it, and what how well you can observe your actions. I suppose that would be the
Yeah, the thing that I say very often, and particularly when criticizing other people doing these things, it's fine, but you just need to take that step back and look in the mirror occasionally. If you can do to yourself what you do to other people and still like what you see, then that's fine. But you know, you've got to do self-examination, I think, more so than worrying about what other people are doing.
So, as a summary of our conversation, what would be the key points to be a martial artist? Let's say karateka, because we're both doing karate. To be practical and to end up in a dark place.
See, again, I'm still stuck with this dark place because I'm in the light as far as I'm concerned. So everybody else is in shadow. For me, the fundamental thing is an open mind. Doesn't matter about anything else. It's not about skill. It's not about the level of knowledge, because if you have an open mind, you can find out the knowledge. You can fill it with whatever you want to. You've got to have an open mind, and you've got to constantly use the why word. As you do with the small children, it's the whole thing. It's always why. You know, if somebody tells you something, that's fine. Keep asking why. And if they run out of answers, keep asking yourself why, and just go through that loop until there's nothing else to ask why about. And for me, that's it.
I would add, because I'm on that part of the journey to the darker place, enjoy the slippery slope.
Yeah, I'm so far down that hill. I'm just coming out to the tailing at the bottom now. It's just a case of seeing where it takes me.
Robert, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for the time.
And I really, really appreciate, and I'm really happy that I found Bunkai Bastards, because it keeps me in check with my own work.
Well, two things that we aim to do, and hopefully we achieve both of those, is stop people taking themselves too seriously and make them step back and think about what they're doing. So the serious point is we want people to think for themselves. The other point is we want people to just lighten the fuck up.
Let's finish on that one.